The day started like any other. I was sitting on my worn-out couch, sipping lukewarm coffee, scrolling through my phone when I heard the front door creak open. It was unusual for my mother to just show up unannounced. "I'm Alex," and this moment marked the beginning of a chaos I never saw coming, the day my mother dropped the eviction notice on me and demanded I move out of the apartment I'd called home for years. She stepped inside, holding a thick envelope in her hand, her face unreadable. "Alex, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight but steady. I frowned, setting my cup down. "What's going on, Mom?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the small dining table and placed the envelope in front of me. The words, "Eviction Notice," were printed boldly on the front. My heart stuttered. "You're being asked to vacate the apartment within 30 days, she said, avoiding my eyes. "I'm renting it to someone else." The room seemed to shrink around me. I blinked, confused. "Wait. What? This is my home. I pay rent every month. Why now? Why are you kicking me out?" My voice cracked with disbelief, a mix of hurt and anger bubbling up. She crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "I'm sorry, Alex. It's just time for a change." Her words felt cold, too vague to be real. "Change? What change? You never mentioned this before. Who is this new tenant? Why didn't you tell me you were planning to rent it to someone else?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was unraveling. The apartment had been my refuge, the place where I built my routine, my sanctuary from the world. My mother shifted uncomfortably but refused to elaborate. "It's a family decision," she said, avoiding my gaze again. "You'll understand soon enough." The room filled with tension, thick and suffocating. I tried to process her words, but nothing made sense. The eviction notice was official, stamped and dated. I had no clue how she had the authority to do this. I had always thought the apartment was under a lease agreement that protected me. I looked around the modest living room, the faded posters on the walls, the cluttered bookshelf with my favorite novels, the worn couch that held countless memories. All of it seemed suddenly fragile, like it could be snatched away in an instant. "Mom, you can't just do this. I pay rent every month. I have a right to stay here." My voice was pleading now, desperate for answers. She sighed, exhaustion and something else flickering across her face, maybe guilt, maybe resolve. "Alex, I'm serious. You need to find another place." Her tone left no room for argument. "But why? What's really going on?" I pressed, refusing to accept this without explanation. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken truths. I reached out, grabbing the eviction notice, scanning the fine print for any clues. It was signed by her, dated just 2 days ago. "Did you get this approved by the landlord? Who owns this apartment, anyway? I thought you were just helping me with the lease." She hesitated, eyes darting away. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Let's just say it's time to move on." The word stung. The person I trusted most had blindsided me with this ultimatum. I felt betrayed, abandoned in the place I had called home. The air between us was thick with tension. I wanted to yell, to beg, to make her understand that this wasn't just about a place to live, it was about my life, my stability. But I didn't. Instead, I sat back down, my mind racing. I thought about reaching out to other family members, hoping for support or at least an explanation. But when I called my sister later that evening, her voice was distant. "Mom said it's best if you find somewhere else," she said flatly, avoiding any further discussion. Even my father, when I tried to text him, didn't respond. It felt like everyone was turning away, leaving me alone in this storm. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the eviction notice again, the paper feeling heavier than it should. How could this be happening? The apartment wasn't just a place to sleep. It was where I had celebrated birthdays, nursed heartbreaks, and planned my future. Now, it was slipping through my fingers because my own mother decided it was time for me to leave. The next day, I confronted her again at breakfast, hoping she might soften or at least clarify. She was quiet, her eyes avoiding mine as I spoke. "Mom, please. We need to talk about this. Why are you doing this? Who is this new tenant? What about my lease?" She sighed deeply, running a hand through her hair. "Alex, I don't have all the answers. But I'm not just making this decision alone. The apartment needs to be rented out for financial reasons." Financial reasons? That caught me off guard. I'd always thought the apartment was stable, that my rent was just going to the landlord. Was my mother involved somehow? I pressed for details, but she remained vague, deflecting my questions with a tight smile. "It's complicated, Alex. Just trust me on this." But how could I? Trust was cracking under the weight of her silence. I left the table, feeling more lost than ever. I reached out to my best friend Maya later that afternoon, needing someone to lean on. Her voice was steady, grounding me. "Alex, you can't just let this slide. You need to find out what's really going on. You have rights, and you deserve to know the truth." Her words sparked something inside me, determination. I realized I couldn't just accept this eviction notice as the final word. There had to be a reason, a mistake, or worse, a misunderstanding that I could fix. I vowed to dig deeper, to find out what was really happening behind the scenes. This apartment was more than just a roof over my head, it was my home. And I wasn't going to give it up without a fight. That evening, I sat down with the eviction notice again, the words blurring slightly as my mind raced through every possible scenario. How did this happen? Was my mother really in charge of renting the apartment? Or was someone else pulling the strings? Why had no one talked to me about this before? The silence in the apartment was deafening as I stared at that paper, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I didn't know what the next step was yet, but one thing was clear, I needed answers. And I was going to find them, no matter what it took. The eviction notice sat heavily on the kitchen table, its stark words echoing in my mind like a cruel joke I couldn't wake up from. I was still trying to make sense of what my mother had told me, the vague hints about financial reasons, the family decision, the new tenant waiting just around the corner, all while grappling with the raw sting of being forced out of the only home I'd known. The silence in the apartment that evening was thick, oppressive, as if the walls themselves mourned the uncertainty. I stared blankly at the peeling paint on the wall, the familiar creaks of the old floorboards suddenly sounding like ominous warnings. My phone buzzed, breaking the heavy stillness. It was Maya. She had been my anchor through countless storms, always steady and sharp, and right now, I needed her more than ever. "Alex, are you okay?" her text read. I typed back quickly, "Not really. Mom served me an eviction notice today. Says I have to move out in 30 days. I don't know what to do." Almost instantly, her reply came, "That's insane. You've been living there for years. You pay rent. You have rights. Don't let them push you around." Her words were a bomb, but also a call to arms. I couldn't just sit here, drowning in confusion and betrayal. I had to find out the truth. Why was my mother suddenly trying to evict me? Who was this new tenant? And most importantly, did she even have the legal right to do it? The next morning, I met Maya at our favorite coffee shop, a quiet corner where we could talk without interruptions. I spilled everything, the eviction notice, my mother's vague explanations, the cold silence from the rest of the family. Maya listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "This is messed up, Alex," she said finally. "You need to get to the bottom of this. Find out who actually owns the apartment. If you have a lease, they can't just kick you out without cause." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "Yeah, but here's the thing, I'm not even sure who the landlord is anymore. Mom's acting like she owns it, but I thought I was just a tenant." This whole thing feels like a mess. Maya leaned forward, determination in her eyes. Then start digging. Ask for all the documents, rental agreements, ownership papers. Don't take anyone's word for it. You might be surprised what you find. Her words gave me a plan, a direction in the fog. I thanked her and left the coffee shop, feeling a little less lost. That day, I called my mother again, trying to sound calm and reasonable. Mom, can you please send me a copy of the rental agreement? I want to understand all the details, I said. There was a long pause. I think it's best if we discuss this in person, she replied, her voice cool. I'm busy right now. Frustration prickled at the edges of my patience. Mom, I'm not trying to fight you. I just want clarity. Please. She sighed, the tension in her voice softening slightly. Fine. I'll get you the papers. Hung up, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was still a chance to clear this up. Over the next few days, I waited anxiously, but the documents never arrived. Instead, I started making calls, neighbors, the landlord's office, anyone who might have information. One afternoon, I bumped into Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman from the apartment next door. She eyed me curiously as I approached. Mrs. Jenkins, do you know anything about the apartment ownership? I'm trying to figure out who's in charge, I asked cautiously. She hesitated, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. Well, young man, I did overhear some arguing a few weeks back. Your mother and some other family members were talking about the apartment. Said something about renting it out to someone else. Seemed serious. Did you hear anything else? Like who owns it? Or why they want to rent it out? I pressed. She shook her head. No, but I got the feeling your mother thought she had the right to make decisions about it. Her words sent a chill down my spine. If my mother believed she owned the place, that could explain a lot. But was she right? Or was this all a misunderstanding? That night, I sat at my laptop, hunting for answers. I navigated the city's property records website, entering the address of the apartment over and over, searching for any clue. Hours later, I found a lead, a name listed as the property owner. It wasn't my mother's. A surge of confusion and hope collided inside me. If she wasn't the owner, why was she acting like she was? And what did that mean for me? I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd visit the city's property records office in person. I needed to see the official papers, to hold the truth in my hands. Before I drifted to sleep, I sent a quick message to Maya, tomorrow I'm checking the property records. Hopefully, this will give us some answers. Her reply was immediate, good. Keep me posted. We'll figure this out together. The next morning, I walked into the city records office, a building that smelled of old paper and bureaucracy. The clerk at the counter gave me a skeptical look as I explained what I was after. After some back and forth, I was handed a thick folder containing the official ownership documents for the apartment. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the pages. There it was, the owner's name clearly printed, the legal descriptions, the dates. It wasn't my mother. And it wasn't me. I felt a strange mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that I wasn't imagining things, that there was a concrete truth somewhere out there. Frustration because now I realized this was even more complicated than I thought. If my mother didn't own the apartment, what right did she have to evict me or rent it out to someone else? I tucked the folder under my arm and stepped outside, the city noise washing over me. The sun was warm on my face, but inside, I felt cold. I needed to confront my mother again, armed with these documents. Maybe then, I could start untangling the mess and fight for my right to stay. Back at the apartment, I paced the floor, the eviction notice still pinned on the fridge. I thought about the nights I'd spent here, the friends who had come and gone, the quiet moments of peace I'd found in this little space. It was more than just an apartment, it was home. I picked up my phone and dialed Maya. Her voice was bright when she answered. "Any news?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Yeah. I found the ownership documents. My mother isn't the owner." I don't know what that means yet, but I hesitated. "It means I have to figure out who really owns this place, and why my mom thinks she can make these decisions." Maya was silent for a moment, then said firmly, "You're doing the right thing. Don't let this go. You deserve to know the truth." Her confidence bolstered me. I realized this wasn't just about a place to live anymore, it was about standing up for myself, about uncovering the truth hidden beneath layers of family secrets and assumptions. As I sat back on the couch, looking at the eviction notice once more, I felt a flicker of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, and the answers might not come easily. But I wasn't alone. With Maya by my side and the facts in my hands, I was ready to keep digging, to fight for my home, and to reclaim the life I thought was secure. Tomorrow, I would start by asking more questions, of my mother, of the landlord's office, of anyone who could shed light on this tangled web. Because I wasn't about to be pushed out without a fight. The apartment felt colder than usual that morning, the early light casting long shadows across the worn carpet, as if the space itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder from the city property record spread open before me, the official documents staring back like silent witnesses to the tangled mess I'd found myself in. Ownership was clear, but it wasn't the clarity I'd hoped for, it only deepened the mystery. My mother wasn't the owner, but neither was I. So who was, and why was I being evicted? Determined to find answers, I picked up the phone and called my mother again. "Mom, I got the ownership records," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're not the owner. So why did you serve me an eviction notice? What's going on?" There was a long pause on the line, then she sighed deeply. "Alex, there's more to this than you know. It's complicated." Complicated didn't cut it. I pressed, "I need you to be honest with me. Who owns the apartment? I don't have all the details. Your aunt has been handling some of the family affairs lately." Her voice faltered, and I could hear the weight of something unspoken. "Your aunt?" I repeated, confusion swirling. "Which aunt? And why wasn't I told any of this?" Mom didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Look, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to keep things together." The line went dead. Frustrated but not defeated, I decided I had to dig deeper on my own. I grabbed my coat and headed out, the folder clutched tightly in my hand. My first stop was the landlord's office, if there even was one. Maybe they could provide some clarity, or at least confirm who was managing the property. The office was tucked away on a quiet side street, a small brick building with peeling paint and a faded sign. Inside, the receptionist looked up warily as I entered. "I'm here to inquire about the apartment at 45 West Elm," I said, trying to sound confident. "I need to know who owns it and who manages the leases." She eyed me skeptically before picking up the phone. After a brief conversation, she looked back at me. "The property is owned by a trust set up by your grandfather. The management is handled by your mother and her sister, your Aunt Linda." The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture was still blurry. "So, my mother and Aunt Linda manage it together? Does that mean they can decide to evict tenants?" "Technically, yes," the receptionist replied. "But there are protocols. Tenants usually get proper notice and explanations." "Which I didn't," I muttered. "Sounds like it," she said, offering a sympathetic shrug. Leaving the office, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. At least I knew who was involved, my mother and Aunt Linda, but the reasons behind their actions remained a mystery. Why had they kept me in the dark? And why was my mother so determined to replace me with someone else? I needed more information, so I decided to visit Aunt Linda directly. Maybe she could shed some light on the situation. Her house was a short walk from the apartment, nestled on a tree-lined street. When I knocked, she answered with a cautious smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Alex," she said. "I wasn't expecting you." "I need to talk to you about the apartment," I said without preamble. "Why is my mother trying to evict me? What's really going on?" Linda sighed and stepped aside to let me in. We sat at her kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken tension. "It's not personal, Alex," she began carefully. "The family has been struggling financially. Your mother and I have been discussing ways to keep the trust afloat." "By evicting me?" I asked, incredulous. "I pay rent. I'm not behind on anything." She nodded. "I know. But the new tenant is offering more money, and the trust needs the income. It's a business decision." "A business decision that's destroying my home," I shot back. "Didn't anyone think to talk to me about this? I'm family." Linda looked away, voice softer. "We wanted to, but things got complicated. Your mother felt it was best to handle it quietly." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. "Quietly? An eviction notice is hardly quiet." She looked at me with a flicker of regret. "I'm sorry, Alex. We never wanted to hurt you." After leaving Aunt Linda's house, I felt more conflicted than ever. The eviction wasn't just a legal matter, it was wrapped up in family struggles and financial pressures I hadn't been privy to. But that didn't make it any easier to accept. On my way back to the apartment, I stopped by the neighbor's door. Mrs. Jenkins had been a quiet observer of the building for years, and I hoped she might offer some insight. She invited me in and poured us both a cup of tea. "You know," she began, "I overheard your mother and Aunt Linda arguing a few weeks ago about the apartment. They seemed worried about money and the trust. Did they talk about me?" I asked. "Not directly. But they mentioned needing to raise the rent, and I think your eviction is part of that plan." I nodded slowly, absorbing the pieces. Financial hardship was pushing my family to make tough choices, but their secrecy had left me blindsided. That night, I spread out all the papers and notes I'd gathered. The trust owned the apartment, managed by my mother and aunt. They were under pressure to increase income, and I was caught in the middle. I thought about Maya's advice, to gather all the documents, get the facts, and stand my ground. I wasn't just a tenant, I was part of a family struggling with difficult decisions and hidden truths. I needed to find a way to protect my home and understand my rights. I called Maya, my voice strained but determined. "I'm getting closer to the truth, but it's messier than I thought. This isn't just about me being evicted, it's about family money and trust management." She listened quietly before responding. "You're doing great, Alex. Keep digging. We'll figure out how to fight this." As I hung up, I realized I had to prepare for the next steps. I needed the rental agreement, any documentation that showed my rights as a tenant, and the legal boundaries of the trust's power. More than that, I needed to confront my mother with everything I'd learned and demand answers. The apartment was no longer just a place to live, it was a battleground, tangled in family secrets and financial strain. But I was ready to fight for it, piece by piece, document by document, until I could reclaim what was mine. The morning air was crisp as I stepped into the city property records office once again, the familiar scent of aged paper and ink wrapping around me like a shroud. I'd been here before, searching for answers, but today felt different. Today, I was determined to unravel the knot that had tied my life into confusion and fear. The eviction notice, the vague explanations, the silence from my family, it all pointed to one thing: I needed to know exactly who held the real power over the apartment I'd called home. I approached the counter with a renewed sense of purpose. "I'd like to see the detailed property records for 45 West Elm," I told the clerk, handing over the address and the folder of previous documents I'd collected. "I want to understand the full ownership structure." The clerk nodded, tapping away at the keyboard before printing out a series of documents. As I sifted through the pages, my eyes caught what I was looking for: the title deed, the transfer records, and, most importantly, the name listed as the official owner. It was me. A jolt of disbelief shot through me. I blinked and read the line again, slowly. It wasn't a mistake. The apartment was registered in my name. I was the landlord, not the tenant. The very realization shifted the ground beneath me. The pieces that had been confusing before suddenly clicked into place. My mother's confidence in issuing an eviction notice now made a strange kind of sense. She must have believed the apartment was hers to manage, but legally, it belonged to me. I felt a surge of empowerment mixed with a flood of questions. How had this happened? Why wasn't I aware of it? And what did this mean for the eviction notice hanging on my fridge? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was my property. I had rights. I wasn't just a tenant being pushed out, I was the landlord who could stop this. I left the office clutching the documents, my mind racing with the implications. As I walked through the busy streets, I thought about my mother. How would she react when I confronted her with this truth? Had she been trying to protect me, or was there something more complicated at play? Back at the apartment, I spread the papers out on the kitchen table, the weight of them grounding me. I called Maya, my voice trembling with a mixture of relief and determination. Maya, I just found out something huge. I'm the owner. The apartment is mine. There was a pause on the other end, then her breathless reply, "Are you serious? That changes everything." It does. I don't understand how I didn't know this, but it means I have the power to stop the eviction. Maya's voice was steady. Okay, so what's the plan? I thought for a moment. I have to confront my mother. Show her the documents. Make it clear this isn't her decision to make. She agreed, and we talked through the next steps, gathering all the paperwork, consulting a lawyer, preparing to assert my rights. That afternoon, I called my mother. Her voice was cautious when she answered. "Alex, what do you want?" "I want to talk," I said. "I have something you need to see." She agreed reluctantly, and a few hours later, she arrived at the apartment. When I handed her the property deed and the title records, her face went pale. "I didn't know," she whispered, eyes wide. I thought the trust still owned it." I shook my head. "It's been in my name for years. I'm the landlord, Mom." Her hands trembled as she looked at the papers. I was trying to help. "The family thought it was better if I managed things, but I never meant to push you out unfairly." I wanted to believe her, but I was angry too. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you issue an eviction notice as if you had the right?" She looked away, voice breaking. "I was scared. The family's financial situation is fragile. I thought it would be easier if I handled it quietly." I took a deep breath, trying to push down the hurt. "Mom, you can't make decisions like this without me. This is my home, my property. I need to be involved." She nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're right. I should have told you everything." The conversation was difficult but necessary. It was the first step toward clearing the fog of confusion that had clouded our relationship. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders, but also a renewed sense of control. Over the next few days, Maya helped me organize all the documents, rental agreements, ownership papers, and legal notices. We scheduled a meeting with a real estate lawyer who confirmed my landlord status and explained my rights in clear terms. The lawyer's office was a quiet haven of expertise. As she reviewed the papers, she nodded approvingly. "You have full ownership and the legal right to occupy the apartment. Your mother's eviction notice has no standing unless you agree." Hearing this gave me a surge of confidence. I wasn't just fighting a battle, I was reclaiming my home. When I left the lawyer's office, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I knew my mother might resist, but I was prepared to stand firm. That evening, I sat on the couch, the eviction notice now feeling powerless in my hands. The apartment was more than just walls and a roof, it was mine to protect. And I was ready to do just that. The weight of the truth settled heavily on my shoulders, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. The apartment was mine. Not just a rented space, but my legal property. That fact changed everything. But knowing that wasn't enough, I had to act, and fast, before my mother's eviction plans moved forward. I reached out to Maya immediately, my voice tinged with urgency as I explained what I'd uncovered. I'm the landlord. The apartment's in my name. I need to make this official, and I need help. Maya didn't hesitate. Okay, first step, get all your documents in order. Rental agreements, ownership papers, anything that can prove your rights. Then, we find a good real estate lawyer. Within hours, we were gathering every scrap of paper I could find, old lease agreements, payment receipts, the property deed, city records. Some of it was digital, some of it crumpled and faded. Each piece felt like a stepping stone toward reclaiming my home. The next day, Maya and I sat in a small, cluttered law office across town. The walls were lined with framed degrees and legal books, the air thick with the scent of coffee and paper. Our lawyer, Sarah, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, her demeanor calm but no nonsense. She listened attentively as I laid out the situation, handing over the documents we'd collected. After a thorough review, Sarah looked up and said, "Alex, based on these documents, you are indeed the landlord. Your mother's eviction notice holds no legal weight without your consent. You have every right to remain in the apartment and decide who lives there." Relief washed over me, but Sarah quickly added, "However, your mother's actions complicate things, especially since she's been managing the property. You need to formalize your ownership and management rights to avoid further confusion." Maya nodded. "So, what's the next move?" Sarah pulled out a folder and began outlining a strategy. "First, you'll need to send a formal notice to your mother, asserting your rights as the property owner. This letter should clearly state that any eviction proceedings must be authorized by you. Next, we'll file the necessary paperwork with the city to update the property management records. Finally, if your mother continues to interfere, we may need to involve the courts." The plan felt solid, but I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My mother was defensive and had already shown she wasn't willing to back down. I thought about how she'd reacted when I confronted her with the ownership documents: shock, confusion, and then resistance. It was going to take more than legal papers to untangle this family drama. That evening, I drafted the formal letter Sarah suggested. My hands shook slightly as I typed, trying to balance firmness with respect. I wasn't just asserting legal rights, I was trying to salvage a relationship strained by secrecy and misunderstanding. "Dear Mom," it began, "I am writing to formally notify you that I am the legal owner and landlord of the apartment at 45 West Elm. Any decisions regarding tenancy, including eviction, must have my authorization. I expect all property management actions to be coordinated through me moving forward." I paused, then added, "I hope we can work together to resolve this situation amicably, for the sake of our family and the home that means so much to me." I sent the email and waited, heart pounding. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Received your letter. I'm trying to understand everything. Can we talk?" It was a small opening, but an opening nonetheless. When we met later that afternoon, the tension between us was palpable. She looked tired, the lines on her face etched deeper with worry. "I'm sorry, Alex," she said quietly. "I thought I was doing the right thing, trying to manage the situation for the family. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." I nodded, swallowing down some of the anger that still simmered beneath the surface. "I understand financial pressures, Mom. But I need to be involved. This is my property, and you can't make decisions about it without me." Her eyes filled with tears. I was scared. I didn't want to burden you with all this. But I see now that I made mistakes. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of fear, misunderstanding, and hurt. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was a start. Despite the progress, I knew I couldn't let my guard down. The next few days brought signs that my mother was still resisting. I heard from a neighbor that she'd mentioned plans to change the locks, a move that would have left me out on the street. I called Sarah immediately. "Can she do that?" "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly. "Changing locks without your permission is illegal. If she tries, we'll take swift legal action." Armed with Sarah's advice, I confronted my mother again. "Changing the locks is not an option. You don't have that authority." She sighed, a mix of frustration and defeat in her voice. "I'm trying to do what I think is best." "Then do it with me, not against me," I said firmly. The standoff was uneasy, but the threat of legal consequences seemed to temper her actions, at least for the moment. As the days passed, neighbors began to notice the tension, and some approached me with support. Mrs. Jenkins, always a quiet presence, told me, "It's clear you're doing the right thing, Alex. It's your home." That encouragement meant more than I expected. With Maya's help, I started plans to formalize my ownership further, updating city records, notifying tenants, and preparing for any challenges ahead. It was overwhelming at times, but I felt empowered, no longer a passive victim but an active defender of my home. One evening, as I sat on the worn couch, Maya by my side, I looked around the apartment, the faded posters, the scattered books, the familiar hum of the city outside the window, and felt a flicker of hope. This was my home. Mine to protect, mine to fight for. And with allies like Maya and the support of a good lawyer, I knew I wasn't alone in this fight. The road ahead might be rocky, but I was ready to face it head-on. The first time I noticed the locks had changed, it was early in the morning. I arrived at the apartment, keys jingling in my hand, only to find the door unyielding, the lock refusing to turn. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. My mother had gone ahead and changed the locks without my consent, trying to push me out. I knocked firmly, but there was no answer. Panic and anger swirled inside me. This wasn't just about property anymore, it had become a battle for control, trust shattered and replaced with cold confrontation. I called Maya immediately. Her voice was sharp, laced with urgency. "Alex, this is illegal. Changing the locks without your permission is a serious violation. You need to get a lawyer involved right now." I dialed Sarah's number, my hands trembling. When she picked up, I explained the situation breathlessly. "She changed the locks. I can't get in." Sarah's voice was steady but firm. "I'm coming over. Don't try to force your way in. We'll handle this legally." Within the hour, Sarah arrived, briefcase in hand, eyes focused but calm. She assessed the situation quickly, taking photos of the lock and the eviction notice still taped to the door. "This is a clear violation of your rights as the property owner. We'll file for an injunction immediately to prevent any further interference." While Sarah made calls, Maya stayed by my side, offering quiet support. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispers of the family dispute spreading like wildfire. A few days later, a formal notice arrived at my temporary address, a legal warning to my mother to cease all attempts to interfere with the property or face court repercussions. The message was clear, but I knew this was just the beginning. Despite the legal warnings, the atmosphere around the apartment grew more charged. My mother's frustration seemed to boil over during family gatherings, and I overheard hushed conversations about the family drama and property disputes. Some neighbors took sides, their opinions shaping a fragile community dynamic. One afternoon, as I walked past the building, Mrs. Jenkins approached me, concern etched on her face. "Alex, I hate to see all this tension. You've always been respectful and responsible. Don't let them push you out." Her words struck a chord. The apartment wasn't just mine, it was part of a community, a place where relationships mattered. Back inside, I focused on preparing for the next confrontation. With Sarah's guidance, I gathered every document, ownership papers, payment records, legal notices, building a solid case to present if things escalated further. Maya helped me organize everything, her calm presence balancing my frustration. "We're ready for whatever comes," she assured me. Then came the day of the confrontation. My mother showed up unannounced at the apartment, determined to move forward with her plans despite the legal warnings. She intended to personally remove my belongings and let the new tenant move in. I stood firm, documents in hand, as she tried to unlock the door. "Mom, you can't do this." "The law is on my side," I said, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Her eyes flashed with defiance. "I'm doing what's best for the family," she snapped. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Sarah arrived just in time, her presence a buffer between us. "This is a legal matter now," she said firmly. "Any further attempts to remove Mr. Alex without proper court orders will have serious consequences." The tension broke, but the damage to our relationship was clear. My mother retreated, leaving me standing in the doorway, the apartment safe for now but the battle far from over. In the following weeks, I noticed the neighborhood's mood shifting. Conversations became more cautious, neighbors wary of taking sides openly but sympathetic in private. I received messages of support from unexpected places, notes slipped under my door, friendly greetings, offers of help. The experience reshaped my understanding of home. It wasn't just bricks and mortar but a space woven with trust, community, and the resilience to stand up for what mattered. One evening, as I sat with Maya, reflecting on the whirlwind of events, I realized how much I'd grown. The fight for the apartment had tested my patience and resolve, but it had also forged a new strength within me. "I never thought it'd come to this," I admitted, exhaustion softening my voice. "But I'm not giving up." Maya smiled, her eyes warm. "You're not alone, Alex. And you're stronger than you know." The road ahead remained uncertain, fraught with family tension and legal hurdles. But with allies by my side and the law on my side, I was ready to face whatever came next, determined to protect the home I had fought so hard to reclaim. The day I decided to confront my mother was thick with tension, the kind that settles deep into your bones and refuses to be shaken off. I had spent the previous nights rehearsing what I wanted to say, clutching the thick stack of documents that proved my ownership of the apartment. This wasn't just a piece of paper, it was my right, my home, and the battleground where years of family secrets and misunderstandings collided. As I stood in the living room, the apartment feeling both familiar and foreign, I heard the door open. My mother stepped inside, her face a mask of guarded emotion. The air between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words and past grievances. I took a deep breath and began, "Mom, we need to talk about this apartment. About the eviction notice, the locks being changed, and everything that's happened." She avoided my eyes, shifting uncomfortably. "Alex, I know you're upset, but I was trying to protect the family." "Protect the family by trying to kick me out?" I shot back, my voice steady but edged with hurt. "This is my home. I am the landlord. I have the legal documents right here." I held up the folder, letting the weight of the papers emphasize my words. Her eyes flickered toward the papers, but she still hesitated. I thought the trust still held the property." "I didn't realize it was in your name." I shook my head, frustration rising. "You should have told me. We could have talked about this." Instead, I found out through eviction notices and changed locks. The room seemed to shrink as family members appeared one by one, my sister, my Aunt Linda, even my cousin, watching silently from the doorway. The gathering felt like a courtroom, everyone waiting for the turning point. I faced them all, determination hardening my voice. "I'm the owner. That means any decisions about this apartment have to go through me. Not behind my back, not without my knowledge." My sister stepped forward, her expression conflicted. "We didn't mean to keep you in the dark, Alex. The family's been under pressure. But maybe we should have handled this differently." I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Exactly. I want us to be a family that communicates, not one that divides over secrets." My mother's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Alex. I was scared. I didn't want to burden you or cause more problems." The room softened as the tension began to dissolve. My Aunt Linda spoke up, "We were overwhelmed and made mistakes. But we want to fix this." I took a deep breath, letting the relief wash over me. "I want to move forward too. But from now on, everything about this apartment and our family's involvement needs to be transparent." Everyone nodded in agreement, the atmosphere shifting from confrontation to collaboration. My mother reached out, taking my hand. "Can you forgive me?" I squeezed her hand gently. "I want to. But it has to be a fresh start." As conversations flowed, plan after plan unfolded: how to manage the apartment fairly, how to support the family financially without hurting each other, and how to rebuild trust. That evening, as the family dispersed, I sat alone for a moment, the apartment feeling like home again. The fight had been hard, but it had opened the door to honesty and healing. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be perfect, but we had taken the first step toward understanding and unity. And for now, that was enough. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the apartment that now felt more like home than ever before. The tension that had gripped the space for so long was beginning to lift, replaced by a cautious but genuine sense of relief. The eviction notice that once loomed over me like a shadow had been cancelled, and I had regained full control over the apartment that was legally and emotionally mine. Even though the legal battles had been daunting, the victory felt like a breath of fresh air. The new tenant, who had been lined up to take over the apartment, was officially notified that the application was cancelled. It was a small but significant triumph that marked a turning point in this long and painful saga. The family remained strained, its fractures visible in the way conversations hesitated and eyes avoided direct contact. But beneath the surface, a fragile thread of understanding was beginning to weave itself through the cracks. My mother and my aunt had agreed to step back from managing the property without my involvement, acknowledging that things had to change. I found myself reflecting on how important clarity and communication were, not just in property matters but in relationships. The chaos had largely stemmed from assumptions and silence, with everyone acting on incomplete information and unspoken fears. Now, with ownership and responsibilities clearly defined, there was room for healing. I spent hours going through legal documents with my lawyer Sarah, finalizing the formalities that would secure my rights as landlord beyond any doubt. We updated the city records, submitted notices to tenants, and ensured that all paperwork was filed correctly. Each signature and stamp felt like a brick laid in the foundation of my reclaimed life. Maya was by my side throughout, her steady support a constant reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. Together, we planned how to move forward, not just legally but practically, how to maintain the apartment, improve the space, and create a home that reflected my ownership and care. Neighbors who had once whispered about the family dispute now smiled and greeted me with warmth. The community's cautious support was a balm to my bruised spirit, reminding me that home was more than just walls, it was about connection. One afternoon, as I sat in the small courtyard outside the building, Mrs. Jenkins approached with a basket of fresh bread. "It's good to see you settled again," she said softly. "This neighborhood needs good people like you." Her kindness moved me. I realized that this journey hadn't just been about legal papers or eviction notices, it had been about preserving the place where my life unfolded, surrounded by people who mattered. Though the scars of the conflict lingered, the path ahead looked clearer. The apartment was safe, the family tensions were beginning to soften, and I was ready to embrace the responsibilities that came with ownership. In the quiet moments, I promised myself to never take this stability for granted again. The house was more than a building, it was a sanctuary, a legacy, and a testament to the resilience required to protect what truly matters. And as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a quiet hope blossoming within me, a hope for renewal, for understanding, and for a future where home meant more than just a place to live. The days that followed the legal formalities felt like a delicate dance, careful steps toward mending the broken pieces of my family and reclaiming the apartment as my true home. The tension that had once filled every corner began to ease, replaced by cautious conversations and tentative gestures of goodwill. It wasn't easy, wounds still lingered, and trust had to be earned back one conversation at a time. I found myself sitting down with my mother more frequently, our talks raw but honest. The walls we'd built of silence and misunderstanding slowly crumbled as we shared our fears and frustrations. She admitted how scared she'd been about the family's financial struggles and how that fear had driven her to make decisions without consulting me. "I just didn't want to burden you," she said one afternoon, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I see now that I was wrong to keep you in the dark." I reached out, taking her hand gently. "We're family. We face things together, not apart." Our conversations became a bridge, connecting the gaps left by months of conflict. We agreed on boundaries and roles. She would no longer manage the property without my involvement, but we would work together to support the family's needs transparently. Maya remained my steadfast ally, helping me navigate the practical side of things. Together, we planned improvements to the apartment, fresh paint, repaired fixtures, and added touches to make the space truly mine. These small projects became a form of therapy, a way to reclaim control and infuse the apartment with new energy. One afternoon, as we hammered away at a loose floorboard, Maya smiled and said, "You're turning this place into a home, not just a property." Her words struck a chord. Ownership wasn't just legal, it was emotional. I was building a life here, creating a space filled with warmth and possibility. The neighborhood support was a quiet but powerful force. Neighbors who had once been distant now stopped to chat, offering help or simply sharing a smile. Mrs. Jenkins became a regular visitor, bringing over homemade cookies and stories from the neighborhood's past. Her presence reminded me that home was as much about community as it was about walls and roofs. Despite the progress, some family members remained distant, their feelings complicated by the events that had unfolded. I respected their space, hoping that time would heal the remaining wounds. Through it all, I learned the importance of clear communication, not just about property, but about feelings, expectations, and support. The chaos had stemmed from assumptions and silence. Now, openness was our foundation. One evening, as I sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, I reflected on how far we'd come. The apartment was no longer just a place to live, it was a symbol of resilience, family, and growth. I felt ready to face the future, knowing that challenges might still arise but confident that I had the strength and support to meet them. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, hope felt tangible. Home was not just where I lived, it was where I belonged, where I was understood, and where I was building something new. And with that thought, I smiled, embracing the promise of the days to come. The night air was warm and filled with the hum of quiet conversations and laughter as I stood in the living room, watching friends and family mingle in the space I had fought so hard to claim. The apartment, once a battleground of eviction notices and locked doors, was now alive with music, chatter, and the clinking of glasses. It was more than a celebration, it was a testament to resilience, to the battles faced and won, and to the hope that had blossomed from the struggle. I'm Alex, and tonight was a new beginning. The gathering was small but meaningful. Maya was by my side, her smile steady and proud as she introduced me to neighbors I'd never met and old friends who had stood by me through the turmoil. My mother was there too, sitting quietly in a corner, her eyes softened by the weight of the journey we'd endured together. The tension that had once defined our relationship had eased into something fragile but real, a tentative step toward healing. As I moved through the room, I caught snippets of conversations, stories about the apartment's past, memories shared over cups of coffee, and plans for what it could become. The walls that had once felt like barriers now echoed with possibility. I paused near the window, looking out at the city lights twinkling beyond the skyline. This apartment wasn't just a piece of property anymore, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for: ownership, family, and the right to belong. Maya nudged me gently. "You've come a long way, Alex." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah. It's been tough, but I'm ready for this next chapter." The night unfolded with laughter and warm embraces. Old wounds remained, but the space between us had shrunk, replaced by understanding and the shared desire to move forward. As the last guests said their goodbyes and the apartment quieted, I stood alone for a moment, the weight of the journey settling comfortably on my shoulders. I thought about the eviction notice that had once threatened to uproot my life, the locked doors, the family conflicts, and the legal battles. Each challenge had shaped me, teaching resilience, patience, and the power of standing up for oneself. This apartment was no longer just a place to live. It was my home, a place where I had reclaimed my voice, rebuilt relationships, and forged a future on my own terms. I felt a profound sense of peace and empowerment. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but I was no longer afraid. I had the strength, the support, and the conviction to face whatever came next. And as I turned off the lights and closed the door behind me, I knew this was just the beginning. A new chapter filled with hope, growth, and the promise of a home truly my own. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.